At 2:23 a.m. on a Tuesday, my grandson's voice cut through the darkness. "Grandpa, my stepmom hit me again." But Dad didn't believe me. 30 years of Dallas PD experience taught me to recognize desperation. Jake was 12 years old, trapped in a bathroom, whispering into his phone while Madison's voice drifted through the door, like honey over broken glass. "She's been writing things down about my accidents," I said. But they weren't accidents. I was already moving, muscle memory from 3 decades of midnight calls. The retirement watch on my nightstand, gold-plated testimony to a career built on finding truth in lies, would have to wait. This wasn't about the past anymore. When I arrived at the house 20 minutes later, Madison opened the door in silk pajamas, perfectly composed despite the hour. Her explanation was rehearsed, clinical. "Jake's been having behavioral episodes. The pediatrician says it's normal adjustment anxiety." But the bruises told a different story. So did the insurance papers I glimpsed on her kitchen counter. That's when I called it in. When Officer Rodriguez arrived and saw what I'd documented, her face went pale. "Edwin," she said, studying the evidence, "this isn't just family drama. This is the truth about human greed, stripped of excuses and masks. The engine of my old Ford was still warm when I backed out of the driveway at 2:31 a.m. Streetlights painted orange stripes across the empty suburban roads as I drove toward my son's house 20 minutes away. Jake stayed on the phone, his breathing gradually steadying as I talked him through each turn, each milestone bringing me closer. "Tell me about this paper you saw, buddy." It was on the kitchen table when I got up for water. Big words I didn't understand, but I saw Jacob Robert Harcourt at the top, and underneath it said something about $500,000. Madison was on the phone with someone talking about timing and documentation. Robert had remarried 18 months ago. Madison Parker seemed perfect, attentive, organized, enthusiastic about family life. She'd swept into their lives like a savior after the darkness of grief. Too perfect, maybe, but grief makes people grateful for any light in the darkness. And my son had been drowning since his first wife died in that car accident 3 years ago. The subdivisions rolled past my window, each house dark and peaceful. I thought about the signs I'd missed. Jake becoming quieter at family dinners, flinching when Madison reached to straighten his collar, Madison's overly detailed explanations for his scrapes and bruises, how she'd interrupt when Jake tried to tell me about school or friends, always with a gentle laugh and some comment about his active imagination. "Grandpa, she's trying the door handle." Through the phone, I heard the soft rattle of the bathroom doorknob being tested. Then Madison's voice, syrupy with false concern. "Jake, honey, you know you're not supposed to lock doors. It's dangerous if you have another sleepwalking episode." Sleepwalking episodes. That was new. "Jake, does she give you medicine to help you sleep?" A long pause. "She says it's vitamins, but they make me feel funny and confused. Sometimes I wake up places I don't remember going to." A detective's worst cases often hide in plain sight, wearing familiar faces and speaking in concerned whispers. The porch light illuminated the perfect suburban facade, manicured lawn, seasonal decorations, the kind of house where neighbors assumed everything was fine. Madison opened the door before I could knock, as if she'd been watching from the window. She stood in a silk robe, her blonde hair perfectly arranged despite the hour, expression composed despite having a distressed child locked in her bathroom. "Edwin, thank goodness you're here. Jake had another one of his episodes. You know how he gets when Robert's traveling, acting out, telling stories for attention. But 30 years of reading body language taught me to watch the hands. Hers were steady, rehearsed, no surprise, no genuine concern. Her pupils were clear and focused. She hadn't been sleeping when Jake called me. She'd been awake, active, planning something. There was something else, too, a faint chemical smell, like the antiseptic wipes we use to clean evidence. Not cleaning supplies you'd expect at this hour, but the kind used to sterilize medical equipment or remove fingerprints. Jake appeared at the top of the stairs, his Batman pajamas torn at the shoulder, dark hair sticking up at odd angles. The hall light caught the edge of something dark across his ribs. When he lifted his arm to wave, relief flooding his young face, I saw the pattern. Finger-shaped bruises in different stages of healing. Fresh ones overlapping older ones, creating a timeline of systematic abuse. I fell down the stairs earlier, Madison said, following my gaze with practiced ease. He's so clumsy lately. The pediatrician thinks it might be related to his growth spurts, but I've been documenting everything for the insurance company. You know how careful you have to be with claims these days. Documenting. Insurance company. That word triggered every instinct I'd developed over 3 decades of investigations. Abusers don't usually document their work unless they're building towards something bigger. I knelt beside Jake in the living room, gently lifting his shirt while Madison busied herself making coffee with unnecessary noise in the kitchen. The bruises told a story, not the random pattern of childhood accidents, but something deliberate, calculated. Along his left side, 5 distinct marks matched the spacing of adult fingers. On his back, linear bruises suggested impact with the edge of something hard, like a stair-step. Jake, can you show me exactly how you fell? Madison's laugh from the kitchen sounded like breaking glass. Oh, Edwin, surely you don't believe his stories. Children his age have such active imaginations. The counselor at school says it's normal for kids from broken homes to create drama for attention. But Jake's eyes met mine, and I saw something I recognized from countless victim interviews, the desperate hope that finally someone might listen. His small hand touched my wrist, and he mouthed silently, "Help me." I touched my retirement watch, a gesture that had become habit when making crucial decisions during my career. The weight of it reminded me that some investigations never truly end. They just change venues. Madison, I think Jake and I need to take a trip to the emergency room, just to be safe. The coffee maker stopped brewing with a sharp click. Madison's voice, when it came, had lost all its artificial sweetness. That's really not necessary, Edwin. I'm sure it looks worse than it is. Boys will be boys, after all. Robert wouldn't want Jake traumatized by unnecessary medical procedures. The sharpness in her voice, the way she invoked Robert's authority, the subtle threat about traumatizing Jake, all classic manipulation techniques. But underneath it, I heard something else. Fear that her carefully constructed narrative was about to be examined by professionals. In 30 years of police work, I'd learned to trust that gut feeling. And my gut was screaming that Jake was in immediate mortal danger. Children's Medical Center at 3 a.m. hummed with quiet efficiency. Dr. Williams had kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, and hands gentle enough to examine Jake without causing more fear. The emergency room smelled like disinfectant and fear, fluorescent lights humming overhead while we waited for X-ray results. Madison paced near the vending machines, her phone pressed to her ear in hushed conversations. I caught fragments. Earlier than planned. Might need to accelerate the timeline. Yes, all the documentation is ready. Dr. Williams appeared beside me as Jake dozed in the examination room, exhausted from pain and stress. Mr. Harcourt, I've been practicing pediatric medicine for 15 years. These injuries... He pulled out a tablet, showing me digital photos of Jake's bruises from multiple angles. This is the 4th time Jake's been here in 6 months. He swiped through medical records on the screen. February 15th, contusions on the upper arm, which Madison attributed to playground roughhousing. March 22nd, suspicious bruising on the torso, explained as a bicycle accident. April 18th, what she called a fall from his skateboard, but the injury pattern suggested impact from above, not a forward fall. The images were damning in their progression, each visit showing more severe injuries, each accompanied by Madison's detailed explanations that sounded plausible individually, but formed a disturbing pattern when viewed together. Doctor, in your professional opinion, these are defensive wounds mixed with systematic abuse. The bruising patterns show repeated gripping, shaking, and impact injuries. Someone is hurting this child deliberately, and they're escalating the severity. He handed me a sealed envelope, photographic documentation, and medical notes. I'm filing a report with Child Protective Services first thing in the morning, Mr. Harcourt. That boy is being tortured. While Madison dealt with billing paperwork, Jake's small hand slipped into mine. His eyes were alert now, the fog of exhaustion replaced by determination. "Grandpa, can I show you something? But you have to promise not to tell her I touched it." He pulled out Madison's phone. She'd left it on the chair while arguing with the insurance coordinator about coverage authorizations. The screen was unlocked, displaying a PDF document that made my blood freeze. MetLife insurance policy. Beneficiary, Madison Parker Harcourt. Insured, Jacob Robert Harcourt. Death disability benefit, $500,000. The policy details were extensive and specific. Death benefit, $500,000 immediately. Permanent disability benefit, $300,000 initially, plus monthly payments of $5,000 for life. Total potential payout if Jake was permanently disabled, over $1 million. The policy was dated September 3rd, exactly 3 weeks after Madison's wedding to Robert. A 12-year-old boy insured for more money than most adults, with his stepmother as the sole beneficiary. I photographed the screen with my own phone, hands trembling as the implications sank in. This wasn't random abuse born of frustration or mental illness. This was systematic preparation for financial gain. "Jake, has she ever talked to you about this insurance?" "She said it was to protect our family if something bad happened to me. She made me sign papers, said it was just grown-up stuff I wouldn't understand. But Grandpa," his voice dropped to a whisper, "she's been giving me medicine that makes me sleepy and clumsy, and she practices with me." "Practices what?" "How to fall down the stairs. She says I need to learn to do it right so I don't get hurt too bad. But I think she wants me to get hurt really bad. 24 hours ago, I thought my biggest problem was loneliness in retirement. Now I was staring at evidence that someone wanted to profit from my grandson's death. By 6 a.m., I was at the 24-hour Kinko's on Elm Street, feeding quarters into the industrial printer while the elderly night clerk dozed behind bulletproof glass. Every page of Jake's medical records from the past 6 months emerged in stark black and white, a paper trail of systematic abuse disguised as childhood accidents. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as I created multiple copies of everything: Dr. Williams's photographs, nursing notes, radiology reports, insurance forms. Each document received a timestamp and my signature as the person maintaining chain of custody. In court, these procedures could mean the difference between conviction and acquittal. My laptop connected to the store's Wi-Fi, and I began the process of digital preservation. Encryption software downloaded slowly, but this evidence needed protection from anyone who might try to destroy it. Each file received multiple passwords, automatic backup to 3 different cloud services, and redundant storage on encrypted USB drives. The process took 2 hours, but thoroughness had saved cases before. By 8 a.m., Jake's medical history existed in physical and digital formats across multiple secure locations. Madison could destroy one copy, but she couldn't destroy them all. Dr. Williams met me in the hospital break room during his lunch hour, the smell of cafeteria coffee mixing with antiseptic and the faint electronic beeping of medical equipment from the nearby units. He spread Jake's medical files across the conference table like evidence photos at a crime scene. "Edwin, I've seen enough abuse cases to recognize the patterns. Look at this progression." His finger traced the timeline. February 15th, bruising consistent with being grabbed forcefully by an adult. March 22nd, impact injuries suggesting being shaken against a hard surface. April 18th, multiple contusions indicating repeated blows or impacts. He pulled out a folder containing photographs I hadn't seen before. "What Madison doesn't know is that we photograph all suspicious injuries for legal documentation. Each visit, the damage was more severe. Each time, her explanations became more elaborate and rehearsed. The images were heartbreaking. Jake's small body, marked by adult hands, captured under medical lighting that revealed every detail. Bruises, in various stages of healing, created a rainbow of abuse across his ribs, arms, and back. "Doctor, from a medical standpoint, what would you say the trajectory indicates?" His expression was grave. "Someone is systematically escalating physical abuse, possibly to create a medical history that supports a future insurance claim. The injuries are severe enough to be documented, but not severe enough to cause permanent visible damage. Yet. I photographed each medical report with my phone, the camera flash reflecting off the white pages. Doctor, would you be willing to testify to this pattern if needed? Mr. Harcourt, I took an oath to protect children. Whatever it takes to stop this, I'll do it. But Edwin, he leaned forward, based on the escalation pattern, I don't think Jake has much time. The next accident might be the last one. And that afternoon, I picked Jake up from school under the pretense of helping with a history project. Madison had been at one of her mysterious coffee meetings, giving us a window of opportunity. In my bathroom, with natural light from the north-facing window, I documented every mark, every healing bruise, every sign of systematic abuse. This is important, Jake. These pictures might help protect you and other kids, too. Can you be brave for me? His nod was small but determined. Will it make her stop hurting me? I'm going to do everything in my power to make sure she never hurts you again. The camera flash caught the trust in his eyes, and I felt the weight of that trust settle on my shoulders like a lead blanket. Each photograph received a digital timestamp, GPS coordinates, and immediate upload to secure cloud storage with multiple backup systems. As I helped him back into his shirt, Jake whispered, "Grandpa, she makes me practice falling down the stairs. She times me with a stopwatch and says I need to get better at looking surprised when I land. She says the more surprised I look, the more people will believe it was an accident." The calculated nature of it made my hands shake. This wasn't impulsive abuse. This was methodical preparation for murder disguised as accident prevention training. First National Bank had been Robert's primary institution since college. The manager, Patricia Chen, had processed his first car loan, his mortgage, and his business accounts. Her concern was genuine when I explained the situation, and her cooperation was immediate when I showed her Dr. Williams' medical photos. "These transfers don't make sense for a normal household budget," she said, pulling up Madison's account activity on her computer screen. September 25th, $2,800 transferred to MetLife Insurance. October 1st, another $2,400. October 8th, $5,000 cash withdrawal. October 12th, $3,200 cash withdrawal. She scrolled through months of transactions, highlighting unusual patterns. Madison's been withdrawing large amounts of cash every few days since August. Cash transactions leave no electronic trail, no record of where the money actually goes. The pattern was clear and disturbing. Large insurance premiums being paid in advance, followed by significant cash withdrawals that could fund any number of illegal activities: private investigators, medical document falsification, witness intimidation, all services that operated in the cash economy. "Mrs. Chen, could you print these records going back 18 months? I may need them for legal purposes." The printer hummed as it produced page after page of financial evidence. Each transaction told part of a larger story, and that story wasn't ending with accidental disability insurance claims. This level of financial preparation suggested something far more permanent. At Techmart Electronics, the teenage clerk looked puzzled when I asked for a burner phone and encryption apps. His green hair and multiple piercings suggested he was accustomed to unusual requests, but a grandfather buying spy equipment apparently crossed into new territory. "Sir, these are usually for, drug dealers and stuff. Are you sure you don't just want a regular phone?" "Son, sometimes the good guys need to stay one step ahead, too." The new phone felt foreign in my hands, lighter than my old flip phone, with a screen that responded to touch instead of buttons. But necessity drives adaptation. I downloaded encrypted messaging apps, secure email services, call recording software, and apps that could hide other apps from casual inspection. Back home, I tested everything, sending encrypted messages to my old partner Jim, who'd moved into private investigation after retirement. The technology felt strange after decades of straightforward police work, but the principles weren't different. Gather evidence, protect sources, build an airtight case. That night, I received a text from an unknown number. "Stop digging, or the boy gets hurt worse. The message appeared on my old phone. The number Madison and Robert knew. They couldn't track my new phone, but they were definitely monitoring my communications. The coffee shop on Maple Avenue became my observation post. Cafe Mocha occupied a corner location with large windows, perfect for surveillance while maintaining the appearance of a retired man reading newspapers and drinking coffee. Madison arrived every Tuesday and Thursday at 2 p.m. sharp, always sitting at the corner table with her back to the wall, a position that allowed her to see everyone entering or leaving. Her companion was a man in his late 30s, nervous energy radiating from every gesture. He dressed professionally but carried himself like someone under enormous stress. Dark circles under his eyes, constantly checking his phone, fingers that drummed anxiously on the table while they talked. I photographed their meetings from across the street, using my phone's zoom function to capture their exchanges. Envelopes passed from Madison to the man. Documents were reviewed with intense concentration, and the man's body language screamed reluctance, shoulders hunched, frequent head shaking, the posture of someone trapped in a situation beyond his control. On the third Thursday, I followed him to his car and photographed his license plate, Texas registration DKR 8293. The DMV lookup would take time through official channels, but patients had built solid cases before. I also noted the car seat in his back seat, clearly installed for a young child, and the soccer ball on the rear dashboard. The license plate traced back to Thomas Tommy Parker, age 38, employed by Consolidated Insurance Services as a senior claims investigator. The address matched Madison's emergency contact information in Jake's school records. Madison Parker's maiden name and Tommy Parker shared the same last name and lived at the same address until 2 years ago. Tommy Parker, Madison's brother, working inside the insurance industry that would ultimately pay out Jake's death benefit. I researched Tommy through public records and social media. Divorced father of an 8-year-old daughter named Emma. Joint custody arrangement with weekend visitations. Recent financial difficulties following his divorce. Perfect leverage for someone looking to recruit an inside accomplice. I watched him leave his office building that evening, noting his slumped shoulders and frequent glances over his shoulder. This wasn't a confident conspirator reveling in criminal profits. This was someone trapped between family loyalty and professional ethics. Someone who knew he was involved in something terrible, but felt powerless to stop it. When he stopped at the grocery store, I noticed the little girl's car seat again, along with a pink backpack and a stuffed unicorn. Someone with a daughter Jake's age would understand exactly what they were helping to destroy. The newspaper archives at the Dallas Public Library yielded their secrets slowly, requiring hours of microfilm scanning and digital database searches. But the pattern that emerged was chilling in its consistency. Madison's first marriage to David Kellerman had lasted 18 months before his death in a single-car accident on Interstate 35. The insurance payout was $250,000. The accident report made interesting reading. David had been taking medication for anxiety, medication found in lethal concentrations in his blood during the autopsy. The investigating officer's report noted several suspicious circumstances. David's prescription bottle contained twice the normal dosage of medication. The accident occurred on a straight stretch of highway with no apparent cause. And David's phone showed recent searches for life insurance policy details and beneficiary information. Most interesting was the insurance investigator's report, which concluded suspicious circumstances warrant further investigation, but ultimately recommended payment due to insufficient evidence for denial of claim. The investigator's signature on that 3-year-old report was Thomas Parker. Madison's pattern wasn't random experimentation. It was a refined process, improved through experience and enabled by an inside connection who understood exactly how insurance investigations worked. I met Robert at his office downtown, the 42nd floor of a glass tower where he worked as a regional sales manager for an automotive parts distributor. His corner office smelled of fresh coffee and printer ink, walls decorated with sales awards and family photos that now included Madison's smiling face. His desk was scattered with project folders and travel itineraries, a man drowning in work to avoid facing problems at home. When I spread Jake's medical photos across his desk, he barely glanced at them before pushing them back across the polished wood surface. Dad, Madison's been nothing but good to Jake. She's patient with his behavioral issues, helps with homework, drives him to activities. Maybe you're seeing things that aren't there because you miss having him around more often. I tried a different approach, showing him the insurance policy information on my phone. Robert, why would Madison need a $500,000 policy on a 12-year-old boy? It's financial planning, Dad. Madison used to work in insurance. She understands these things better than we do. She's protecting Jake's future, making sure he'd be taken care of if something happened to me. The rationalization was complete, impenetrable to logic or evidence. Robert had built a fantasy where Madison was the perfect stepmother, and he would defend that fantasy against any contradiction, even from his own father. Son, look at these bruises. Really look at them. But he stood and walked to the window, his back to the evidence. Dad, I know you mean well, but Madison and I have this handled. Jake's been seeing a counselor for his adjustment issues. The accidents are part of his acting out phase. The finality in his voice hit harder than any criminal's confession I'd ever heard. My own son was choosing willful blindness over protecting his child. The whispers started at the H-E-B grocery store on Tuesday afternoon. Madison had been busy over the weekend, sharing concerns about my mental state since retirement, questioning whether a man my age should have unsupervised access to a troubled child. Mrs. Henderson from 3 houses down actually crossed to the other side of the cereal aisle when she saw me approaching. The pharmacist at CVS asked pointed questions about my prescription medications and whether I was adjusting well to retirement life. At the coffee shop where I'd been documenting Madison's meetings, the barista who'd been friendly for 2 years suddenly couldn't make eye contact. Mr. Harcourt, she said nervously, maybe you should find somewhere else to do your research. Other customers have been asking questions. Madison was systematically isolating me, cutting off my support network with surgical precision. To the neighborhood, I was becoming the paranoid grandfather whose grief over his daughter-in-law's death had twisted into suspicion of her replacement. The cruel genius of it was that my investigation activities, photographing Madison's meetings, following her brother, spending hours in archives researching her past, looked exactly like the obsessive behavior of someone losing touch with reality. Jake called me from the school nurse's office on Wednesday afternoon, sobbing so hard I could barely understand his words. Grandpa, she found the bandages you put on my ribs. She said if I keep showing people my bruises, she'll send me to a special school where kids can't talk to their families. Slow down, buddy. Tell me exactly what happened. She makes me practice now. Every day after school, she makes me walk up and down the stairs while she watches. She times me and takes notes about how I move. She says I need to learn to fall better so I don't get hurt so bad when it happens for real. The systematic nature of it was breathtaking in its cruelty. Madison wasn't just abusing Jake. She was training him to participate in his own destruction, teaching him to fall in ways that would create the maximum injury while appearing accidental. And Grandpa, there's something else. She's been giving me different medicine now. White pills that make me dizzy and forgetful. She says they're vitamins, but they make everything feel fuzzy. Sometimes I wake up in places I don't remember going to. Drugging him to create disorientation, then forcing him to practice dangerous falls while impaired. This wasn't preparation for an insurance fraud scheme. This was rehearsal for murder. The first threatening note appeared under my windshield wiper while I shopped at Home Depot. Stop digging into things that don't concern you. Some families prefer privacy. The paper was generic office supply store stock, the handwriting obviously disguised with block letters, but the message was crystal clear. I photographed the note in place before touching it, then sealed it in an evidence bag using techniques that had become second nature during my police career. The paper might yield fingerprints, the ink could be traced, and the placement suggested someone with access to store parking lots during business hours. That evening, a van with tinted windows parked across from my house for 3 hours. Professional surveillance, the the kind that costs money and requires connections. They wanted me to know they were watching, wanted the psychological pressure of constant observation. When I approached the van with my camera, it drove away slowly, deliberately, not the panicked flight of amateurs, but the calculated withdrawal of professionals who had accomplished their mission of intimidation. The court summons arrived by certified mail on Friday morning. Madison was filing for a restraining order, claiming I'd been harassing her family and exhibiting concerning behavioral patterns consistent with deteriorating mental health in elderly individuals. Her attorney was good. The filing referenced my 30-year career in law enforcement as evidence of potential for violence and obsessive investigation behavior. My own service record was being weaponized against me, turned into evidence of mental instability. The petition included sworn statements from neighbors about my suspicious surveillance activities, from store employees about my agitated questioning of customers, and from Robert about my paranoid delusions regarding his wife. The hearing was scheduled for the following Wednesday. If the restraining order was granted, I'd be legally barred from contact with Jake, unable to investigate Madison's activities, and publicly branded as a dangerous, mentally unstable individual. The call came at 2:47 a.m. Jake was at Children's Medical Center again, unconscious after falling down the stairs while sleepwalking. This time the injuries were severe. Concussion, broken rib, internal bleeding, requiring immediate surgery. I arrived to find Madison in the family waiting room, tears streaming down her face in a performance worthy of an Academy Award. She'd changed into a conservative dress and pulled her hair back severely, creating the image of a grieving stepmother overwhelmed by tragedy. He'd been sleepwalking more frequently lately, she explained to the cluster of nurses and social workers surrounding her. The pediatrician increased his medication, but it seemed to make the episodes worse. I should have installed safety gates at the top of the stairs. But Dr. Williams pulled me aside in the hallway, his expression grim. Edwin, these injuries aren't consistent with a tumbling fall. The impact patterns suggest he was thrown against something hard, then positioned to make it look like a stair fall. The broken rib shows a focused impact, not the distributed trauma of rolling down stairs. Through the observation window, Jake looked impossibly small in the hospital bed, machines monitoring his vital signs, while IV tubes delivered pain medication and fluids. His face was pale and still, dark hair stark against the white pillow. Doctor, is he going to be okay? Physically, yes. But Edwin, we're keeping him sedated while the brain swelling goes down. When he wakes up, Dr. Williams paused, choosing his words carefully. Head injuries can cause memory problems. If someone wanted to ensure Jake couldn't testify about what really happened to him, this kind of injury might be exactly what they'd choose. Looking at Jake's small form surrounded by medical equipment, I realized Madison had accelerated her timeline. The restraining order hearing was in 5 days. If I was legally barred from investigating, Jake would be completely vulnerable to whatever final accident she was planning. My dining room table disappeared under layers of evidence accumulated over 2 weeks of investigation. Medical photos arranged chronologically showed the progression of Jake's injuries. Financial records traced Madison's suspicious cash withdrawals and insurance premium payments. Surveillance photos documented her meetings with Tommy Parker. The timeline wall looked like something from a detective show, red string connecting photographs to dates, creating a web that traced Madison's systematic preparation over 18 months, insurance policy purchase in September, escalating accidents beginning in October, isolation tactics against family members who might interfere, documentation of every injury for medical purposes. But looking at it all laid out completely, a more sinister pattern emerged. Madison wasn't just preparing for a large disability claim. The escalation was too steep, the injuries too severe, the timeline too compressed. She was building a case history that would support Jake's accidental death, not his survival as a disabled child. The medical records showed increasing severity with each incident. The financial records showed cash withdrawals large enough to fund multiple illegal activities. The surveillance evidence showed coordination with an inside accomplice at the insurance company. This was an abuse escalating out of control. This was a methodical plan to murder a child for money, disguised as a series of accidents leading to a tragic but inevitable fatal outcome. Attorney Patricia Mason had handled enough child abuse cases to recognize the patterns. Her office walls were lined with diplomas and awards, but more importantly, with photographs of children she'd helped save from dangerous situations. She studied my evidence for 2 hours, occasionally making notes on a legal pad, her expression growing darker with each revelation. Financial documents, medical records, surveillance photos, and recorded conversations spread across her conference table like pieces of a complex puzzle. Edwin, this is compelling circumstantial evidence, but Madison's attorney will argue coincidence and grandfather's grief-motivated paranoia. The restraining order hearing gives them the perfect platform to discredit everything you've discovered. She leaned back in her leather chair, studying the timeline I'd constructed. What we have here suggests attempted murder, conspiracy, insurance fraud, and systematic child abuse, but proving it requires evidence that directly connects Madison to intentional harm with specific criminal intent. What kind of evidence? A confession? Documentation of her planning? Testimony from a co-conspirator? Something that shows premeditation and intent to kill, not just intent to defraud. She tapped her pen against the legal pad. What we really need is someone on the inside, someone who can testify to her actual plans and timeline. I thought about Tommy Parker, sitting in that coffee shop with his nervous energy and reluctant posture, the car seat in his back seat, the stress lines around his eyes. A man with a daughter Jake's age would understand exactly what he was helping to destroy. I might have an idea about that. Chapter 10, The Confrontation Setup. Using my encrypted phone, I called Madison from a number she wouldn't recognize, disguising my voice slightly and letting defeat color every word. Madison, this is Edwin. I think we need to talk. Edwin? How did you get this number? Robert said you weren't supposed to contact us directly. I got it from Jake's emergency contact list. Look, I've been thinking about everything that's happened, and maybe you're right. Maybe I have been seeing problems that aren't there. A long pause, then cautious interest in her voice. What do you mean? I mean, maybe an old cop's paranoia isn't what Jake needs right now. Maybe I should step back and let you and Robert handle his behavioral issues without my interference. Oh, Edwin, I'm so glad you've come to your senses. Jake needs stability right now, not more chaos and accusations. I let my voice crack slightly, as if struggling with emotion. I just want to meet with you once, to clear the air. Maybe we can find a way to move forward as a family. Jake needs his grandfather, and I need to know he's safe and loved. We agreed to meet at Riverside Park near White Rock Lake the next afternoon, a public place where she'd feel safe to speak freely. What Madison didn't know was that my phone would be recording everything. My old partner Jim would be positioned nearby with additional surveillance equipment, and Detective Rodriguez would be monitoring from an unmarked vehicle. Madison arrived at the park looking confident, almost triumphant. She'd chosen a picnic table near the playground where families with children created natural cover for our conversation. The afternoon sun made her blonde hair shine golden, and she smiled with genuine warmth for the first time since I'd known her. I'm so glad you're being reasonable, Edwin. This whole situation has been so stressful for everyone, especially poor Jake. I let my shoulders slump in defeat, playing the role of a broken grandfather accepting defeat. Maybe you're right. Maybe I was seeing problems that weren't there. I suppose all those injuries really were just accidents. Exactly. Her smile widened, and I caught a glimpse of something predatory underneath the perfect facade. Children his age are so accident-prone, especially boys. It's almost like they're drawn to danger, you know? And with his recent behavioral issues and medication adjustments, well, the risks are even higher. Behavioral issues? Oh yes, the sleepwalking, the coordination problems, the memory issues from his new medication. It's all documented extensively. His pediatrician is very concerned about the liability risks of having such an accident-prone child. The recording device in my pocket captured every word as Madison painted Jake as an insurance disaster waiting to happen. She'd crafted the perfect cover story for whatever final accident she was planning, complete with medical documentation and professional consultations. I just worry about him being alone with Robert traveling so much. Well, that's the thing, Edwin. Robert's trip to Houston next week is going to be extended. Corporate restructuring, you know. He'll be gone for at least 10 days. She checked her watch with practiced casualness. Of course, that means Jake and I will be spending lots of quality time together, just the two of us. And then she made the mistake that sealed her fate. Tommy's been so helpful with all the paperwork and documentation. Having someone inside the insurance industry who really understands how these tragic accidents work, well, it makes everything so much smoother when the inevitable finally happens. The processing time for claims is usually months, but with proper preparation and inside advocacy, we should see resolution within days. She'd just confessed to conspiracy, insurance fraud, and premeditated murder on a recorded line that Detective Rodriguez was monitoring in real time. I found Tommy Parker at his daughter Emma's soccer game Saturday morning, sitting alone on the aluminum bleachers while 8-year-old girls in bright uniforms chased a black and white ball across impossibly green grass. The morning sun cast long shadows across the field, and the sound of children's laughter provided painful contrast to the conversation we needed to have. Emma had Madison's blonde hair, but Tommy's worried blue eyes. When she scored a goal, her face lit up with pure joy, and she waved at her father with unself-conscious delight. Tommy's wave back was automatic but hollow, the gesture of a man too consumed with guilt to properly celebrate his daughter's happiness. "You're Edwin Harcourt," he said when I sat beside him on the bleacher. It wasn't a question. "And you're the insurance investigator who's been helping your sister commit fraud." He watched Emma sprint across the field, her ponytail bouncing with each step. "Emma's 8 years old. Same age gap between her and your grandson as there was between Madison and me growing up. Madison practically raised me after our parents died in a car accident when I was 12. I understand family loyalty, Tommy, but that boy is in real danger." "You think I don't know that?" His voice cracked, and several other parents looked in our direction. He lowered his voice to a whisper. "I've been helping Madison document Jake's accidents for 8 months. Every photo, every medical report, every piece of evidence that would support a massive disability claim." He pulled out his phone with shaking hands, scrolling through text messages from Madison. The latest one was timestamped the night before. "Phase 3, Sunday night. Make sure you're ready to file the claim first thing Monday morning. This time it has to look perfect." "Tommy, what's Phase 3? His hands shook as he put the phone away, and I noticed his fingernails were bitten down to the quick, a stress response I'd seen in countless suspects over the years. "Madison's been escalating Jake's injuries gradually, building a medical history that would support either permanent disability or—" he couldn't finish the sentence, "or accidental death. Phase 1 was establishing the pattern, regular accidents that created medical documentation without causing permanent damage. Phase 2 was increasing severity and frequency, making the accidents look like a child with coordination problems and behavioral issues. The soccer game continued around us, children laughing and parents cheering while we discussed a plan to destroy a child's life. The cognitive dissonance was overwhelming. Phase 3 is supposed to be the final accident, something that either leaves Jake permanently disabled and unable to ever testify about what really happened, or—" He stared at his daughter, who was now playing defense with fierce determination. "Madison's text messages have been getting more specific. She's not planning for Jake to survive this time." "But you've been documenting everything she's asked you to do. Why?" "Because 18 months ago, I helped her collect on David Kellerman's life insurance policy. At the time, I thought it was just paperwork irregularities. You know how complicated these claims can get. I helped her navigate the system, expedite the processing, make sure the investigation focused on David's medication rather than Madison's access to it." He pulled out a thick manila envelope he'd been carrying. "But when she married your son and immediately took out that massive policy on Jake, I realized what I'd really helped her do. I'd helped her commit murder and get paid for it." Tommy opened the envelope, revealing contents that made my blood run cold. Photographs of supplies Madison had purchased over the past month, rope, sedatives, household chemicals that could simulate accidental poisoning, and detailed floor plans of Robert's house with notes about stair configurations and impact angles. She She thinks I'm documenting Jake's accidents to support her insurance claim. But what I'm really documenting is her detailed instructions to me about how to make those accidents look convincing to investigators. He pulled out a small digital recorder. Every conversation where she's planned Jake's injuries, every text message where she's discussed timing and methods, every piece of evidence that shows this isn't abuse escalating out of control. It's premeditated murder for financial gain. The recorder contained dozens of files, each labeled with dates and brief descriptions. Madison discusses drugging timeline. Madison explains stairfall mechanics. Madison details cleanup procedures. She's planning to drug him tomorrow night when Robert gets back from his extended business trip. Make it look like Jake took extra medication to help with his sleepwalking, then had a fatal fall down the stairs, but this time the fall would be staged to cause massive head trauma and cervical fracture. I thought about Jake lying in that hospital bed, machines monitoring his recovery from his last accident, and realized Madison had been using each incident as practice for the final murder. Tommy, why are you telling me this? Why risk your relationship with Madison? He looked at Emma one more time, watching her high-five teammates after a successful defensive play. Because I have a daughter, Mr. Harcourt, and every time I look at her, I see Jake's face from those medical photos Madison made me review. No amount of money is worth destroying a child. Will you testify to all of this, Mr. Harcourt? I'll do whatever it takes to stop her. But we need to move fast. Tomorrow night might be too late. Back in my dining room war room, Tommy and I laid out 18 months of evidence like generals planning a military campaign. His documentation filled in every gap my investigation had missed, creating a complete picture of Madison's systematic preparation for murder. The timeline was chilling in its precision. September 2022. Insurance policy purchase immediately after marriage. October 2022 through March 2023. Establishing accident patterns with minor injuries. April through August 2023. Escalating severity and frequency to build medical history. September 2023. Final preparations including material purchases and detailed planning. Look at this, Tommy said, spreading out Madison's text messages chronologically. She's been planning every detail for months. The timing of Robert's business trips, Jake's medication schedule, even the specific stair configuration that would cause fatal injuries while appearing accidental. The evidence was overwhelming. Recorded conversations detailing murder plans, financial records showing suspicious purchases, medical documentation, proving systematic abuse, and a clear timeline leading to Jake's planned death in less than 24 hours. But the most damning evidence was Madison's own words, captured on Tommy's recordings, discussing Jake's murder with the clinical detachment of someone planning a business transaction. Detective Lisa Rodriguez had been my partner for the last 5 years before my retirement. She listened to everything without interruption, occasionally making notes in her precise handwriting, her expression growing grimmer with each revelation we presented. Edwin, this is conspiracy to commit murder, systematic child abuse, insurance fraud, and witness tampering. But Madison's defense attorney is going to argue entrapment and claim Tommy is fabricating evidence to avoid prosecution for his own involvement. She studied the evidence spread across the police station conference table, hundreds of documents, photographs, recordings, and financial records that painted a picture of premeditated murder for financial gain. We need to catch her in the act, with multiple witnesses and indisputable evidence of intent. A sting operation where Madison incriminates herself without any possibility of claiming entrapment. How do we do that? Tommy continues playing his role as Madison's inside accomplice, but this time he's wearing a wire. We position surveillance teams around the house, and when Madison begins implementing her final plan, we have everything documented in real time with no possibility of legal challenges. She handed me a temporary badge and weapon. You're sworn in as a reserve officer for this operation. Welcome back to the force, Detective Harcourt. Let's save your grandson. At the police station's Technical Operations Center, specialists fitted Tommy with a wireless microphone the size of a shirt button. The transmitter could broadcast conversations clearly for up to 500 yards, with backup recording systems ensuring nothing would be lost, even if the primary signal was interrupted. Remember, Rodriguez briefed him while technicians tested the equipment, let Madison do most of the talking. Ask open-ended questions that get her to explain her plans in detail. We need her to incriminate herself clearly and unambiguously. Tommy's hand trembled as he tested the microphone, his voice barely audible through the speakers. Testing. Testing. Can you hear me okay? Perfect clarity, the technician confirmed. Remember, the microphone is always on once we activate it. Be careful about what you say, even when you think Madison isn't listening. What if she suspects something? What if she realizes I'm working with you? Rodriguez leaned forward, her expression serious. Then you abort immediately and get out of the house. Signal us by saying, I need to check on Emma, and we'll move in for immediate extraction. But Tommy, that boy's life depends on this operation working. Are you ready to do this? He thought about his daughter playing soccer, about Jake lying unconscious in that hospital bed, about David Kellerman dying alone in his car 3 years ago. I'm ready. Let's stop her before she kills again. October 26th, 6 p.m. Surveillance teams positioned around Robert's house like pieces on an elaborate chessboard. Detective Rodriguez coordinated from the mobile command unit parked 2 blocks away, radio chatter creating a constant low-level buzz of professional preparation. I monitored Tommy's wire from an unmarked vehicle across the street, watching Madison's silhouette move efficiently through the kitchen windows. She checked her watch repeatedly, consulting a notebook that I now knew contained the detailed timeline for Jake's murder. All units, packages arriving on schedule, Rodriguez announced as Tommy's Honda pulled into the driveway at exactly 6:30 p.m. Maintain radio silence until target begins incriminating conversation. Through my binoculars, I could see Jake in his bedroom window, apparently recovered enough from his hospital stay to be back home. He was reading a book, unaware that his stepmother was finalizing plans to kill him within hours. Through Tommy's wire, Madison's voice came through crystal clear, sharp with anticipation, and barely contained excitement. Tommy, thank God you're here. Robert's flight was delayed, but that actually works better for our timeline. Is everything ready on your end for the claim filing tomorrow? Madison, walk me through the plan one more time. I want to make sure I don't miss anything when filing the paperwork. Jesus, Tommy, we've rehearsed this a dozen times. But fine. The sound of papers rustling came through the speakers. Robert gets home at 8:30, completely exhausted from his delayed flight and the extended business trip. I give Jake his sleepwalking medication at 9, except this time it'll be 3 times the normal dose mixed with the sedatives I've been saving up. Every officer monitoring the transmission heard Madison detail her murder plan with the casual tone of someone discussing dinner preparations. By 9:30, Jake will be completely disoriented and barely conscious. When he inevitably gets up confused and stumbling around 10 o'clock, I'll guide him to the top of the stairs and... She paused, and I could hear her satisfaction. The fall this time will be fatal. Massive head trauma, cervical fracture, the kind of injuries that are instantly lethal but completely consistent with a drugged child falling downstairs. And Robert won't suspect anything? Robert will be devastated, but not surprised. We have 8 months of medical documentation showing Jake's escalating coordination problems and sleepwalking episodes. The increased medication dose will show up in the autopsy, but it'll look like a tragic accident where a confused child took extra pills and then fell. What about the insurance investigation? Madison's laugh was cold and calculating. With you handling the claim from the inside, the investigation will focus on confirming the accidental nature of death, not questioning it. We'll have the $500,000 death benefit within 2 weeks, and I'll be free to disappear and start over somewhere else. All units. Target has provided detailed confession to premeditated murder. Move in immediately. Repeat. Target has confessed to planned homicide with specific methodology and timeline. Police cars converged on the house from 4 directions, emergency lights painting the suburban street in red and blue while maintaining siren silence to avoid alerting Madison. I was first through the front door, my temporary badge giving me authority to lead the arrest team. Madison stood in the kitchen exactly as I'd observed through the window, wearing rubber gloves and holding a bottle of prescription sedatives in one hand and Jake's evening medication cup in the other. For the first time since I'd known her, her composed mask slipped completely, revealing the calculating predator who had been hiding underneath. Edwin? What is this? Tommy, what the hell is going on? Madison Parker Harcourt, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder in the first degree, systematic child abuse, insurance fraud, attempted poisoning, and criminal solicitation. The handcuffs clicked closed around her wrists with the most satisfying sound I'd heard in months. As Detective Rodriguez read her rights, Madison's eyes found Tommy across the room. How could you betray family like this? But Tommy's response was clear and strong. I am protecting family. Real family doesn't murder children for insurance money. Robert's rental car pulled into the driveway just as we led Madison to the patrol car. When he heard the recordings of her detailed murder plan, he collapsed on the front steps, finally understanding what his willful blindness had nearly cost his son's life. Jake appeared at his bedroom window, drawn by the commotion outside. When he saw Madison in handcuffs, his expression wasn't fear or sadness. It was pure relief. The courthouse steps felt solid and familiar under my feet 6 months later as reporters gathered for Madison's sentencing. Judge Patricia Williams had been thorough in her review of the evidence, and her final judgment reflected the calculated nature of Madison's crimes. 25 years for conspiracy to commit murder in the first degree. Additional consecutive sentences for systematic child abuse, insurance fraud, witness tampering, and attempted poisoning. With sentencing guidelines and the aggravated nature of her crimes, Madison would serve a minimum of 20 years before any possibility of parole. The investigation had uncovered evidence linking Madison to 2 additional suspicious deaths: David Kellerman 3 years earlier, and a previous boyfriend named Michael Torres, who had died in a drowning accident 5 years before that. Both cases were being reopened, with Tommy's cooperation providing crucial insider knowledge about how the insurance claims were processed. Standing in the March sunshine, watching Madison led away in shackles and an orange jumpsuit, I felt the weight of 30 years of police work crystallize into this single moment of justice served. She would never harm another child, never manipulate another family, never profit from suffering again. The same neighbors who had crossed the street to avoid me during Madison's isolation campaign now brought casseroles, apologies, and shamefaced gratitude. Mrs. Henderson knocked on my door with tears in her eyes and homemade oatmeal cookies, explaining how Madison had systematically manipulated her concerns about elderly mental health issues. Edwin, I'm so ashamed. She seemed so caring, so concerned about Jake's well-being and your adjustment to retirement. She made it sound like she was protecting that poor boy from your deteriorating condition. The pharmacist at CVS called personally to apologize for questioning my prescriptions. The barista at the coffee shop resumed our morning conversations about sports and weather, pretending the weeks of awkward silence had never happened. Madison's web of community manipulation unraveled as quickly as it had been woven, leaving behind neighbors grateful that someone had been willing to see past perfect facades. The thing that scares me most, Mrs. Henderson continued, is how believable she was. How she made your completely reasonable concerns sound like paranoid delusions. If you hadn't kept investigating, she didn't need to finish the sentence. We all understood how close Madison had come to succeeding. Robert sat beside Jake's bed at Children's Medical Center during the final psychological evaluation, holding his son's hand while Dr. Sarah Martinez reviewed the progress notes from 6 months of intensive therapy. The physical injuries had healed completely, but the emotional trauma would take much longer to resolve. Jake's showing remarkable resilience, Dr. Martinez explained. Children are incredibly adaptive when they're finally in a safe environment with consistent support. The nightmares are becoming less frequent, and his trust in adult authority figures is slowly returning. When Jake's eyes opened, the first thing he did was squeeze Robert's hand. Dad, are you staying today, or do you have another business trip? I'm here, buddy. I'm here, and I'm never traveling for work again unless it's absolutely necessary. And even then, you'll come with me or stay with Grandpa. Robert had quit his regional position and taken a local role with a significant pay cut but regular hours. The family counselor he'd been seeing twice weekly recommended months more of therapy for both father and son. Trust, once shattered by betrayal and willful blindness, doesn't heal overnight. Dad, Robert said to me as we left the hospital together, Jake between us chattering about his upcoming science fair project, I don't know how to apologize for choosing Madison over Jake's safety, for not believing you when you tried to show me the truth. Son, we can't rewrite the past. Madison was a skilled manipulator who knew exactly how to exploit your grief and your desire for stability, but we can choose how we move forward from here. How do I make up for almost letting my son be murdered? By being the father he needs now, by trusting your instincts, by never letting anyone convince you to ignore evidence of abuse again. 9 months after Madison's arrest, Jake laughed at my police stories with genuine delight, instead of the fearful politeness that had characterized our relationship during her reign of terror. We sat on my back porch on a warm Saturday morning, drinking hot chocolate, and watching squirrels conduct elaborate raids on the bird feeder. Grandpa, tell me again about the time you caught the bank robber who tried to escape through the drive-through window. The bruises had completely disappeared, but more importantly, the constant wariness had left his eyes. In its place was the natural curiosity and mischief that belongs in every 12-year-old boy. His therapy sessions with Dr. Martinez had progressed from twice-weekly crisis management to monthly check-ins focused on building healthy relationships and recognizing manipulation tactics. You know what I learned from this whole thing, Grandpa? What's that, buddy? Adults aren't always right, even when they seem really sure about stuff. And if something feels wrong, it's okay to keep asking for help until someone listens. The wisdom in that statement would serve him well for the rest of his life. The official letter from Child Protective Services arrived on a Tuesday morning, printed on state letterhead with formal language that couldn't disguise the urgent need behind the request. Mr. Harcourt, given your extensive law enforcement experience and recent successful involvement in the Parker Harcourt case, would you consider consulting with our department on cases involving suspected systematic abuse and insurance fraud? My retirement watch ticked steadily as I sat at my kitchen table, reading the job description and thinking about Jake's recovery, Madison's manipulation techniques, and the dozens of other children who might be trapped in similar situations. 30 years of police work had officially ended, but perhaps my real calling was just beginning. How many other children were waiting for someone to see past perfect facades and trust their instincts? How many families were being systematically destroyed by predators wearing masks of care and concern? I called the number that afternoon and accepted the consulting position. My first case involved a stepfather whose 3 children had suffered an unusual number of accidents since he'd taken out large life insurance policies on all of them. Some patterns never change, but now I knew how to recognize them. Sunday dinner at Robert's house had become a sacred weekly ritual, a chance for 3 generations to practice being a family without the toxic influence that had nearly destroyed us all. The dining room table where Madison once sat now held Jake's honor roll certificates, Robert's work laptop, which he actually closed during family time, and my crossword puzzles. Dad, Jake made the academic achievement list again this quarter, Robert announced, serving pot roast that he'd actually cooked himself instead of ordering takeout. And he's been selected for the gifted and talented program. And Dad doesn't burn the vegetables anymore, Jake added with a grin, spearing a perfectly cooked carrot. Much. Looking around that table, I saw something Madison's calculated manipulation had never been able to touch. The unbreakable bonds between people who choose to love and protect each other despite their flaws and mistakes. The empty chair where Madison used to sit no longer felt like an absence. It felt like freedom. Robert had become the father Jake deserved, present and engaged instead of hiding behind work obligations. Jake had regained his natural confidence and curiosity, no longer walking on eggshells around unpredictable adult emotions. And I had found a new purpose in protecting other children from predators who wore familiar faces. Grandpa, Jake said as we cleared the dishes together, do you think there are other kids like me, ones who need someone to believe them? Yes, buddy, and now I know how to help them. The elementary school auditorium buzzed with excited parent conversation as families gathered for the spring drama production. Jake stood center stage in his costume as the brave knight, his voice strong and confident as he delivered his lines about protecting those who couldn't protect themselves. The irony wasn't lost on any of us. Robert and I sat in the front row, applauding until our hands hurt when Jake's character saved the kingdom from the evil sorcerer who had been deceiving everyone with false kindness. Jake's smile blazed across the stage like sunshine, and I remembered the scared, bruised boy who had called me at 2 a.m. 18 months ago. That frightened child still existed somewhere inside Jake, but he was now surrounded by the boy he was always meant to be: confident, protected, and safe. After the performance, he ran to us with his arms wide, and Robert swept him up in a hug that lasted long enough to make up for months of distance and willful blindness. Did you see me remember all my lines, Grandpa? You were perfect, buddy. A real hero. Tonight, as I finish writing this account, I want you to remember something crucial that could save a child's life. Trust your instincts when something feels wrong about how a child is being treated. Children don't lie about abuse, and the most dangerous predators often wear the faces of people we trust most. If you suspect a child is being systematically harmed, document everything you observe. Photograph injuries if possible. Keep detailed notes with dates and times. Report your concerns to authorities even if family members discourage you. Keep asking questions when others want to look away, because every child deserves adults who will fight for them, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it disrupts family harmony, even when others question your motives. The statistics are sobering and should motivate action. 1 in 4 children will experience abuse during their childhood, and in 90% of cases, the abuser is someone the child knows and trusts. But here's what those statistics don't capture. How many children are saved when one adult decides to act on their suspicions instead of assuming someone else will handle the situation? Madison's case wasn't unique. Across the country, children are being systematically abused by caregivers who document their injuries to support false insurance claims. The intersection of child abuse and insurance fraud creates particularly dangerous situations because the financial incentive encourages escalating violence that often ends in death. Be that adult who asks difficult questions. Trust your instincts about children's safety. Investigate when explanations don't match injuries. Children's lives depend on adults who refuse to look the other way. Jake celebrated his 14th birthday last month with a party full of friends who know nothing about his past trauma, exactly as it should be. Madison's final appeal was denied, and she'll spend the next 2 decades in federal prison. Tommy Parker received probation in exchange for his cooperation and now works full-time with Child Protective Services, using his insider knowledge of insurance fraud to identify and stop other predators. And somewhere tonight, a child is hoping that someone will see past the perfect facade of their abuser and choose to believe them instead of accepting convenient explanations. What would you do if you received that desperate 2 a.m. phone call?